Welcome back to another Good For You Tip of the Week. Today, I'm busting some big fat myths. Now, between TV commercials, fitness magazines, food labeling, the next popular diet, and the next YouTube guru on fitness, it's left us completely confused about dietary fats. Is fat good for us today? Is it bad for us tomorrow? So, I'm going to dispel in this video some of the 3 most common myths about fat so we understand which ones we should invite into our kitchen and which ones we should run from as fast as possible. Alright, so fat is a very important part of our diet. It doesn't just add calories to our diet, it helps with muscle movement, energy production, it helps us absorb fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K. It makes up some cell membranes, and it helps with clotting and it reduces inflammation as well. Now, the most important part, it makes up the myelin sheath, which is a protective cover over the brain. So I'd say eating dietary fats is a pretty important thing. So, big fat myth number 1. All fats are bad. Wrong. Just like fashion and bad jokes, some are good and some are bad. All right, there are 3 types of dietary fats. The first one is trans fat. Second is saturated fat, and third is unsaturated fat. Now, unsaturated fat comes in a mono and polyunsaturated form. We'll talk about that a little later. I'm going to jump into the worst kind of fat first, and that's trans fat. Now, trans fats are the ones to avoid. They're industrially produced, meaning that they're produced by a process of hydrogenation. This makes them solid at room temperature and a longer shelf life. Now, these types of fat come disguised in tempting treats like the pastries and the snack foods that we eat. Typically, these are the ones found in the middle aisles of the grocery stores, right? So, although they may taste amazing, they wreak havoc on our body. Trans fats increase our risk for chronic illnesses like diabetes, coronary artery disease, and metabolic syndrome. Now, these harmful trans fats have been linked to increase our total cholesterol in the body, which creates inflammation. Inflammation will increase your risk of diseases like heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and arthritis, and other chronic illnesses. So exclude them from your diet so you do reduce your risk of getting these chronic illnesses. So fortunately, back in 2015, the Food and Drug Administration deemed that trans fats are really harmful for us to consume. They gave the food supply makers 3 years to remove trans fats from our food. Now, unfortunately, almost 5 years later, trans fats are still found in our foods. The scariest part is, even if you read the label and it says 0 grams of trans fat, that's not necessarily true. These companies are allowed to tag their products with 0 grams of trans fat as long as the product has less than 0.5 grams of trans fat per serving. This is crazy, because think of the serving of Oreos. It's 2. I know no one that eats only 2 Oreos. We have to finish our glass of milk with it. So I would say about a sleeve later of the Oreos, we've had more trans fat than we should be consuming in the whole entire year. All right, so let's move on to saturated fats. This is the second worst type of fat that you can have. Even the experts are confused what the role of saturated fats are. What they do agree on is that more research is needed. So if you take a high amount of saturated fats in your diet, it's actually been correlated with increasing your risk of chronic diseases that I've discussed before. Heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, coronary artery disease, but the direct relationship still remains blurred. Remember, more research is needed. So common saturated fatty acids come in 4 different forms. There's lauric, myristic, palmitic, and stearic. Now let's break this down as simply as possible. Lauric, myristic, and palmitic have been correlated with increasing low-density lipoprotein, which is our bad cholesterol. So stearic, the last one, has remained neutral, but remember, more research is needed for that. Lauric and myristic forms are found in coconut oil. Palmitic form is found in fatty cuts of beef, full fat dairy, butter, and palm oil. And stearic is found in beef, egg yolks, and also butter. All right, so you have to keep the consumption of saturated fats to a minimum. What's recommended is not more than 10% of your daily caloric intake. So for example, if you have a 2,000 calorie diet per day, do not consume more than 20 grams of saturated fat. But let's put this in perspective. 3 ounces of ground beef has 8 grams of saturated fat. I know when I used to make a burger, it would be about 10 ounces of beef. I know, don't judge me. All right, so unsaturated fats. These are our good fats, and I left the best for last. Now, it comes in 2 forms, the polyunsaturated fat and monounsaturated fat. These fats are actually liquid at room temperature. This is our good fat. They have protective benefits to them. So consuming them is actually very protective of, for example, our heart. Now, the polyunsaturated form comes in omega-6 and omega-3. These are found in foods such as fish, fatty fish, nuts, seeds. The omega-6 and the omega-3 form may also help lower levels of LDL, which is our bad cholesterol, and it helps increase levels of HDL, which is our high density lipoproteins. Those are our good cholesterol. These HDLs actually protect our heart from heart disease, which is fantastic. So the second type of unsaturated fat is the monounsaturated fat. Like its counterpart, the polyunsaturated fat, it has heart protective benefits to consuming them. These are found in plant oils such as olive oil, canola oil, peanut oil, and safflower oil. So, and the best part, in avocados. These are healthy fats that you should be consuming and bringing into your kitchen. All right, so big fat myth number 2. Is low fat the best choice? All right, so even though low fat or fat-free whipped cream might sound like a good choice, it's not a healthy addition to our diet. So remember, when you have a low-fat product or a fat-free product, it tastes like its full-fat counterpart because the fat is being substituted with either salt, sugar, flour, or fillers in order for it to taste like full fat. So then you might be asking, well, is consuming full fat better or added sugars? Ultimately, it's better to have more fat than sugar because remember, fat is an essential part of our diet. It helps with, just to name a few, it produces the myelin sheath of our brain. It helps with absorbing fat-soluble vitamins, which is very important to us, and it helps with cellular structure, where sugar is not necessarily essential to our diet. So ultimately, when you're choosing full-fat food versus low-fat or fat-free foods, you have to consider how many times a week you'd like to consume the product. For example, if you enjoy having yogurt every morning or every day for a snack, consider the lower fat option. But if you only have it once or twice a week, consider the full fat option because that little bit of total calories that you're adding, it won't push you over your maximum fat allotment for the day. It really depends on does it fit into your daily caloric needs. So, big fat myth number 3. We're going to talk about, does eating fat make you fat? No. So the idea that fat makes you fat is absolutely wrong. Okay? Fat is just another nutrient source, just like proteins and carbohydrates. What makes us fat is when we're consuming excess amount of calories versus the amount that we're expending. This means we're in a caloric surplus. So when you eat fat, it doesn't automatically get stored as fat as long as it's being utilized. So how much fat should I eat per day? Okay, so the number that's recommended really depends on the individual. Fat is an important nutrient that we must consume. So it all depends on getting your fat from the best sources, so keeping it to unsaturated fats like the mono and poly forms. Remember, avocados, nuts, seeds, plant oils should be consumed. Now, what the dietary daily intake they recommend is that 20 to 35% of your total calories per day should be fat, nothing more than that. So for example, if you eat a 2,000 calorie a day diet, do not exceed more than 44 to 77 grams of fat per day. And this fat should be coming from the unsaturated fatty acid forms. So if we really break it down, you want to focus on consuming 15 to 20% of mono unsaturated fats, again, found in avocados, seeds, nuts, and plant-based oils. You want to consume 5 to 10% in the polyunsaturated form, okay? And lastly, you want to consume less than 10% of saturated fats, which means no more than 20 grams for a 2,000 calorie diet. Trans fats, you should be consuming a total of none, and your total cholesterol intake for the day should not exceed 300 milligrams. Well, I hope this short video helped to debunk some of the big fat myths that are going around. Thank you for tuning in to another Good For You Tip of the Week. Make it a great week, and I'll see you next week.